With more, we're now joined by the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Premier, thank you for making the time.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Michael.
And you. So here we have Alberta. You're now going to act as the proponent of this new pipeline to the West Coast. There are 3 companies involved as an advisory role, to my understanding. Does this not just reinforce what Premier Eby has always said, that there's no real private interest in a new pipeline?
I would say that we have a market right now where it's difficult to attract private equity because of some of the bad laws that have been in place over the last 10 years. This is why I've talked to the Prime Minister about needing a grand bargain where we get a bitumen pipeline, the Pathways project to reduce emissions, but then also address the 9 bad laws. The way pipelines get built is that they get proponents willing to pledge barrels. Well, if you've got an emissions cap and a tanker ban at the moment, there aren't any proponents that are willing to pledge those barrels, which is part of the reason why it's difficult to get a pipeline built. It's a chicken and egg problem, and we're hoping to be able to cut through that so we can get this on the major projects list so we can attract private capital so that we can start the industry going again.
Okay, a chicken and egg problem, as you say, but here you have Premier Eby consistently saying that that he doesn't see this as a real proposal. Can you convince him that if you get rid of these roadblocks, that there is a real deal possible?
Well, I look at the proposals of the first 5 projects that have been announced, and there's an aspirational project to build a major high-speed rail line between Quebec and Toronto, which I think is a great project. But it's pretty early days, and it's a pretty substantial project that would probably require a lot of government money. We think that we're further along on this one because, first of all, Northern Gateway did have a proponent 10 years ago. We do have 3 companies at the table giving us technical advice who collectively have about 550 years of pipeline experience. So we believe that if we can get to a point where the government's willing to say yes, put it on the projects list, that we'll be able to attract that private capital. I've always been of the view that if this exercise is all about proposing projects that then federal taxpayer money has to be used to build, that's going to be a failure of the enterprise. What we need to do is we need to get some of the $500 billion worth of private investment that has been scared away from this country back into the country, and we think that we can be a catalyst to make that happen.
Okay, a catalyst, as you say, but let's go back to a little bit of what you were saying earlier, that there are still regulations that might be challenging for private corporations, and among them is that oil tanker ban along the BC West Coast. You've been raising it time and again. What's the latest on that? Is Ottawa willing to get rid of that ban?
We've been talking to them about how we would be able to either repeal or substantially revise some of the bad laws that are in place, and that has obviously been one of them. You can't build a new pipeline if you're not able to load it onto a ship, and so it is going to be up to to Prime Minister Carney to give an indication of whether or not he's willing to work with us. We have told him that the grand bargain means it's all 3. If we want to build the Pathways project to have lower emissions, which we do, you have to have a revenue source to pay for that, and the revenue source you get is from having a new revenue stream that comes from having a new market and a new pipeline so that you can generate those revenues. On top of that, though, we need to be able to address these 9 laws so that we have the proponents, or Cenovus and CNRL, Imperial, and various others, willing to expand production so that they can fill the pipeline and get those products to market. That's how it has worked historically, is that when we did have a private sector proponent with confidence, they would go out to the market, get barrels pledged, and then they'd be able to go to the banks and the equity markets in order to get the dollars to invest. The federal government with their bad laws have interfered in that process. So if we're going to be serious about making a change so that we can attract private capital back, those are the things that are going to have to be changed. So that's what I'm working on with the federal government, and I hope we make some progress.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also mentioned Northern Gateway, the past proposal from like over 10 years ago, but that was met with some real opposition from environmental groups and Indigenous leadership. How will this proposal, and I know you're still going to work on it, but how do you see this proposal addressing those issues so they don't actually become oppositional concerns?
Well, our beginning point has always been that there needs to be ownership from Indigenous nations. And it has to be at the early stages. So one of the first things that my Indigenous Relations Minister, Rajan Sani, did on Monday was to call Indigenous leaders and let them know that this was going to be announced today and that we want to partner with them on it. She's already paid a visit to Port au Prince Rupert and spoken with some of the leadership that is local there as well. And we're intending to build the relationships, identify the issues issues and to make sure that Indigenous nations are full partners in the development of this pipeline proposal. So we did, looking back historically, there were 38 nations that had been community benefits partners in the original Northern Gateway Pipeline project. We have, in the meantime, seen that Coastal GasLink was developed, as well as several LNG projects. Trans Mountain was developed and expanded, and so we have had some success in being able to move projects forward. But there's been at great expense. And in the case of Trans Mountain, it went probably about $10 billion beyond what it should have, just because we didn't have a private proponent. That's why we don't think that these are the kinds of projects that should be built by government. We believe that if we create the right environment, the private sector will build them, because the case is so strong for being able to access new markets, particularly in Asia. We know that our Asian partners have already received some of our product. They want more of it. And if we're going to diversify our customer base, that is the best opportunity to do so.
And the environmental concerns, is that about carbon capture? Is that a grand deal here, or is there other ways that you can address those concerns as well?
I mean, there's all kinds of ways. What I like about the Pathways project is they talk about carbon neutrality by 2050. They want to do carbon capture, utilization, and storage. You can build interties with our neighbors in Saskatchewan and British Columbia in order to decarbonize our grid, either with nuclear power or hydropower. We're very keen to look at those as potential options. And we also have direct air capture is one of the last mile proposals. So the CO2 is, of course, one issue. But there are also issues on the ground as you're developing out a project of this magnitude. With linear pipeline projects, you have to make sure that you're addressing local issues around land use, around indigenous use, around hunting and trapping, and ensuring that those rights are respected. And so it's a long process that we have to go through, but I believe it's a very important one, a worthwhile one, and to have indigenous ownership in it so that they have a long-term revenue stream to be able to address local concerns with their own source revenue. That to me is really a pathway to true economic reconciliation. So that's why we started there, is we want to be a catalyst to ensure that we've got indigenous ownership as well.
Less than a minute left, but I have to ask, because you've been fairly confident that a pipeline will be included in the second tranche of national projects. What if it's not?
I would hope that we would have a pretty strong indication from the federal government about whether they're serious about acting on the things that they campaigned on. I saw with great interest that Prime Minister Mark Carney campaigned on being the strongest economy in the G7. He campaigned on being an energy superpower on both conventional as well as new energy. And so he's got to make good on those words, in my view. He got a mandate on that basis, and we're going to see whether or not he's going to make some of the changes that will allow us to get there. We're meeting him halfway, and so we're just asking for a partner in the federal government, because it benefits all of us. If we can get a new pipeline to the coast, 1 million barrels a day, it would add $20 billion worth of annual GDP, and all of the revenues associated with that go to both the provincial government as well as the federal government. We think that this is a way that we can get a win-win-win all the way around, and these are the kinds of projects that we need to build more of.
Premier Smith, always appreciate the time. Thank you.